Hello, I'm Ann Gritch, and I'm delighted that with me today is Mary Aumack, who is the Executive Director of the Catholic Foundation, has lived all her life in the Diocese of San Jose since the diocese was started. So I'm delighted that you're here, Mary.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit, your background? St. Justin was your parish?
Yes, I went to St. Justin Grammar School and Notre Dame High School, and I actually have not lived here my whole life because Santa Clara University was 2 miles from my parents' house, so I went to Gonzaga. So I was in the Pacific Northwest for about 7 years. But clearly a product of this diocese, and since I moved back to California, very much involved in my parish.
Yeah. And your parish now
My parish now is St. Mary of Immaculate Conception in Los Gatos.
in Los Gatos, right, okay. You and I were together at Sister Claude's funeral not too long ago,
Yes.
and I remember your mentioning that you sat next to Sister Joan Pinella,
Yes.
a Notre Dame sister who taught you in high school.
Yes.
So I just think how wonderful it's been in our diocese, what the women religious have really given to this Church of San Jose.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I think it's one of those things in your life that you sort of knew when you were younger and experiencing these incredible women. I was very close with Sister Joan Pinella, still am. But orders of magnitude, more gratitude for it later, really understanding what they went through, what they accomplished, and what they mean to this diocese and the charism of all the different orders, whether it was a hospital or a school or religious instruction. Huge contribution.
Yeah, definitely. We owe them a lot. There's
I'm
no
also in
question
love
about
with
it.
Sister Rosalie Pizzo.
Oh yeah, well, she's wonderful.
Yes.
She is. She's indestructible.
Yes, she and I went to high school together, just different years.
Okay. You know, before we leave the topic of the women religious, the wonderful thing now too is some of the newer orders of sisters, the Vietnamese sisters and the Filipina sisters who are here,
Yes.
and just doing wonderful work with those communities. So it's,
Yes, and I think that at Our Lady of Peace or at Our Lady of Refuge, you see those wonderful women as well.
yeah, it's quite wonderful. So, January 27th, 1981, that is when the announcement was made that San Jose would become a diocese. Where were you?
January 27th, 1981, I was in Spokane.
Ah,
Actually, I was not here because that was just a couple of years after I graduated college and I was going to graduate school. That was the year that I moved home.
at 81?
Yes.
Ah, so the announcement probably didn't even reach you in Spokane? Huh?
No.
Not right away?
No.
Okay. So when you came home, how was that?
Gosh, and I don't know at that point that I at some point it must have registered to me that we were our own diocese. I don't remember it being a big
Deal.
thing with
Yeah.
me.
Okay.
No, because I think for me, growing up, it was much more about my parish than the archdiocese, probably.
Yeah.
And then when I moved home, we were living in Campbell, and we went to St. Lucie at that time.
Many of our guests have talked about the fact that San Jose, Santa Clara County, was distant from the archdiocese, that we had our own style, our own energy. We were far away
Yes.
physically,
Yes.
geographically.
Yeah, and Father Terry Sullivan says that they used to refer to it as down there. Yeah,
Right. And of course, that was before Silicon Valley also.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's
which is
right.
kind of amazing when you
Yeah.
think about it.
Father Terry Sullivan and Father Dan Derry and Father Monsignor Mentasti were the priests that I grew up with.
Ah.
It's pretty awesome.
You talk a little bit about Monsignor Mentasti.
Oh. Monsignor Mentasti had his, I think it was a Basset Hound Schopenhauer. He started St. Justin Parish from a barn. When they built the church, my father was one of the people who literally built that church. My sister was the first baby baptized in the existing church.
Wow.
My parents were very, very involved in St. Justin at the time. So I believe Dan Derry was ordained in '63 and Monsignor Sullivan in '64, something like that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So I was 6 and 7 when they
Uh-huh.
came to St. Justin with Monsignor Mentasti, and Monsignor Mentasti was this larger than life figure. We always talk about his New Year's Day sermon because he never would have used the word homily, and his sermon was, "Life is short, death is certain, hell is forever. Think it over." And if you grew up in that parish, as did I, as did Rick Rodoni, when you hear that said, you quote it word for word, and you don't miss a word, because he was famous for it.
Every New
And-
Year's, huh?
Yes, and so he had this sort of scary persona, and wasn't scary at all. My mother loved him. Yeah, big figure in my family's life. Yeah.
Now, Father Terry Sullivan was living at St. Justin, but he was involved in catechetical ministry at the time. Is that
Yes,
right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was around. I mean, we knew him. He baptized my nephew. He has done my parents' 40th, my parents' 50th. He did my dad's funeral mass. Very much part of our family.
We had a wonderful interview with him, too.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah, he's a good man.
He just attended with the first class that went all the way through St. Justin's School, had their 50th anniversary.
Oh, my.
And they invited Monsignor Terry, and he came. And out of a class of 50 kids, 50 years later, 30 of them came.
That's impressive.
Yes, and several more wanted to but couldn't.
Wow.
Yeah. When you talk about how Catholic school forms a person, particularly Catholic elementary school,
Yeah.
look at this group of people 50 years later.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is just amazing.
Really, really cool.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your work. You were at Catholic Charities for a good...
I was a volunteer at Catholic Charities.
Ah.
So my background is all high-tech sales and marketing. I was a vice president at HP. I ran $1 billion distribution business for HP. Kind of a parallel track was my Catholic volunteerism. So I did 2 terms on the board of Catholic Charities. I chaired their annual donor recognition event, their Caritas event,
Oh, yes.
for 14 years.
Oh, wow.
So I'm still, I love Catholic Charities, still involved with Catholic Charities. Half my friends think I work for Catholic Charities because people get
'Cause you're there.
confused. Well, they get confused with what's Catholic Charities, what's the foundation, you know.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So tell us about the foundation, how it got started, and how you got involved, and
Okay.
what it is.
Well, the foundation was started in 2004, really as a partner to the Rooted in Faith capital campaign for the diocese. And I'm sure you'll talk about the campaign. It's really the only major big one that we've done in this diocese, aside from the cathedral campaign that Bishop Domain did. And at the time, the bishop wanted donors to be assured that the monies they contributed to the campaign could only ever be used for the purposes outlined in the campaign. So they were concerned about potential litigation, and they didn't want the money to be available to creditors. So the foundation was set up very strongly separate from the diocese.
I remember.
But it's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, we are very committed to our separateness and to that commitment to donors. At the same time, we're very much in solidarity with the bishop. And I would never want anyone to feel that our work is not very much for the benefit of the Diocese of San Jose. So the foundation was for the campaign. We were collecting and managing those funds. We started granting in 2008, well before the campaign had finished collecting. I joined the board in 2008, and in 2010, the executive director left, and it happened kind of fast. And I stepped in just to keep things going. And then the board and I had this decision to make. The campaign was winding down. We had a forever responsibility to the funds, to invest the funds, to grant the funds according to the campaign. So there had to be some activity no matter what. So we could kind of skinny down to that, or instead we could look at what it could be, and that's what we did. So the idea of the foundation is to create opportunities for people to provide what we call forever value for their parishes, elementary schools, religious orders, in the form of endowed funds. And with the goal of broadly increasing Catholic philanthropy. Not taking this finite circle of giving and just parsing it up differently, but adding in terms of endowments. And right now we have a major endowment campaign for parishes, and I have a million stories of people talking about answers to their prayers, and I always use the example of my mother. My parents never would have gone to a estate planning seminar. They would have thought that was for the rich people. But if someone had given them an easy way to make a gift at death to St. Justin Parish, they would have done it in a minute. And we didn't ask. So now we're asking. We're very overtly asking. One pastor gave this beautiful statement. We were at a reception. We do a lot of gatherings. He said, there are about 2,000 families that contribute to this parish something every year. If each of those families remembered us in death with just $5,000, that's a $10 million endowment.
Wow.
Exactly. So everyone can multiply 2,000 times 5,000, but when you say it that way, that is completely doable. Will 100% of the people do it? Of course not. Will many people do more than $5,000? Absolutely. A $10 million endowment for that parish is a doable goal. And now it's in people's heads. They'll do it.
That is wonderful.
It's super wonderful.
Tell us some other stories of people.
Well, I'll tell you, I was at a finance committee meeting. I go to a lot of finance committee meetings at parishes when they're thinking about endowment. And the next day, a guy called me and said, "My wife and I have been waiting to be inspired." Yeah, and so he's doing a separate match thing for their school. But I think my best story is I was at a little reception, tiny, 6 people, with a pastor in his study a couple years ago. The next day, a guy called me, and I've quoted this so many times, I remember his exact words. He said, "This is the answer to my prayers. I knew I wanted to remember the parish in my estate plan. I didn't want to leave an expendable gift. I didn't want to burden them with small endowment. Now I don't have to." So we gave him language, he put an estate plan. About a year later, I got a call from an attorney. He had gone to heaven. So it was a $50,000 gift to the endowment for that parish. But then it gets better. It was Christmas week, and I get a call from his son. He doesn't know anything about the foundation, wants to understand this thing that his father, he wasn't contesting it, he just wanted to understand it. So I called, and I was able to relate this conversation to this donor's son. And he said, "My parents loved that parish. All their kids went to school there. All their grandkids went to school there. This is the perfect legacy for my father." That's what he said. That's my best story. I have 152 stories. That's my best story.
That's a very fine
Because when you
story.
think about legacy of the diocese, and you can think about our legacy as well, right? Doug and I very strongly want to be a forever part of St. Mary in Los Gatos. It's been hugely formative of our family and continues to be today. And I think that's the gift that the foundation wants to give to parishioners, this opportunity to make that kind of impact.
And people do love their parishes, don't they?
People love their parishes. I met with a donor a couple weeks ago who lived in Menlo Park, played in San Francisco Symphony, retired, and had an opportunity to go teach at University of Indiana. So did that. Came back to the Bay Area, and the way they chose where they wanted to live was by checking out parishes. And they settled on St. Mary in Los Gatos.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. People
Yeah.
love their parishes.
It's interesting, too. The priests have often said, they come and go, but the people stay. The people are there in the parish.
That's right. And that's what we're hoping for this idea of legacy, that when we build a culture of remembering church, that it is something that that survives pastor change, that it becomes part of the DNA of the parish. There's lots of examples of those. A really strong RCIA program at a parish almost develops its own life, right? Of course,
Absolutely.
the pastor adds to that, but it's going to continue.
Exactly.
Right? We hope
Yeah.
that's the same for our work.
Yeah, that is wonderful. That is really wonderful. Tell me, in your experience, because you do get out and about to the parishes and
I
the
do,
diocese,
I
right?
do.
And you know the pastors, and you know
I know
the
many.
the finance committee members.
Yes, yes.
How would you say you came on board as director? Was 2010? Is that what
Yes.
you? So it's been almost 7 years.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. Isn't
Yeah.
it? Where does the time go?
I know.
At any rate, what kinds of changes have you seen in the last 7 years? In parishes or people's attitudes or...
Do you know what I'm hearing? So, I'm hearing stories of growth. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we were hearing consistent stories of mass attendance is down, the collection is down. And I think some parishes still struggle financially. But I'm hearing more of the uptick. And evangelization and the Francis effect and
And in our diocese, new parishes,
yes.
Our Lady of Refuge, Christ the King.
Yes, Our Lady of Refuge, if I visit there quite frequently, and from nothing, the foundation was able to make a $4 million grant
Mm-hmm.
for the start of that parish, the money that came from the parishioners into the capital campaign. Fabulous. You visit there on, I don't know, let's say a Thursday afternoon. You see the sisters that you talked about.
Yes.
You see someone practicing music in the little side part. You see meetings going on with finance people, or, well, Monsignor Rios is on sabbatical right now, but when he's there, there's constantly flow. That parish is a confluence of us. And it's fun just to be
Isn't
there.
it?
Yeah.
And there is a pastoral associate who is a young Latina woman
Yes.
there.
Yes. She
Talk
runs
a
the
little
place.
bit about women in the parishes, women in San Jose.
Oh, gosh, I think, well, Anabea is a perfect example. I have huge respect for her. And she is the joy of the gospel personified.
Mhm.
Because in her work, she always brings it back to that. Aren't we blessed? Aren't we grateful? Yeah, and we now see women in certainly pastoral associate roles, business manager roles, and then MPL. My good friend Dorothy Carlson ran my parish that I
Yep.
grew up in.
Mhm.
And I'm gratified by that. I also am grateful that our Bishop McGraw and before him Bishop Dumaine very strongly didn't just welcome women but wanted women
Yes.
in leadership roles. And I was at the funeral for a sister, as you said, and when Bishop McGraw talked about Sister Claude as one of the foundresses of the diocese.
Mhm.
And in that, he spoke about the very intentional work by Bishop Dumaine to have women like the Chancellor. And it was one of those things like, did you realize at the time? No.
No.
I didn't even give it a second thought. But in talking about how unusual it was even to have a lay person be the Chancellor, let alone a lay woman.
Mhm.
And so I'm grateful to Bishop Dumaine
Yeah.
for that.
And I think you have a point here too, that we didn't think, I mean, we loved it, but we didn't think it was that unusual. But those of us who were involved nationally and would talk to people from other dioceses would realize how unusual it was.
That's
and
right.
how far advanced San Jose was, thanks, as you say, to our both of our bishops.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're unique. I work with Catholic foundations all across the United States. When we were working on our business plan, we invited them to come here to San Jose
Mhm.
to share best practices. And we now do that every year. And so I get a sense of other dioceses and archdioceses. And these are all, good, well-intentioned people
sure.
and bishops and all of that. We have something special here. The inclusiveness of San Jose, I think the forward thinking positions of both of our bishops, we really have something. We also are unique in how compact we are.
Exactly.
And a lot of people don't realize that. We joke about the fact that on a bad day, the farthest parish from my office is about a 50-minute drive. And that's if it's bad.
Mhm.
I have a friend who runs the Catholic Foundation of Eastern South Dakota. And the farthest parish from his office is a 5-hour drive.
Oh, yeah.
So our ability to speak with each other, to share best practices, to visit pastors, to spread good news, it's orders of magnitude easier in a single county diocese.
It really is.
It's really, that's a huge benefit for us.
And it's how dioceses should be.
Yeah.
Where people know each other, you know the parishes. Yeah,
Right.
as you say, you can get around. I've often thought like the state of Utah the whole state is the diocese of Salt Lake City. How can you imagine?
No, and they have to think, like I have a good friend who runs the foundation in Santa Fe, and they have to have satellite ministry groups and circles and advice, because they really do want to be broadly representative. My friend in Columbus says the same thing. It'd be easy just to have input from the parishes in Columbus,
Sure.
but that's not the archdiocese.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Yeah, no, we're super fortunate.
We
you know,
are.
that we're fortunate that the bishop's home is our home, and that we can gather in his backyard to, to spread news or raise money or celebrate achievement or whatever, and it's no one drives more well, except for traffic. It's not that hard to get to.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. What would you say is the greatest challenge facing either the diocese or the foundation?
I think that channeling people's faith with works of the church, this broad idea of stewardship, of working really hard to have everyone feel welcome and a part and valued and contributing, and maybe even going out to the neighborhoods to do that. More and more. I was at dinner last night with this young couple, and I'm hearing all these really hopeful signs or energy, and I think it's kind of harnessing that energy. And sometimes we speak about, or we get feedback from parishioners that all we want to do is raise money, that we equate stewardship with writing a check. And if we can harness this, maybe it is the Francis effect, people's renewed interest in their faith, and channel that toward works, what inspires you, build social ministries. I think we have an opportunity to be a model for the whole world, because we have these X 100,000 Catholics in this little valley that I think are just wanting that something. And then maybe that something brings people back to church. I don't know, maybe it starts with a pantry program, or helping refugees, or immigration documentation or something. I don't know. Finding a thing that inspires, and then feeding that, I think, is our challenge. But the opportunity is endless. People are just waiting to be inspired.
You're inspiring. I suspect you like your job.
So I've always liked my work, and I feel that the combination of my for-profit experience, my Catholic volunteerism, and my Catholic faith brought me to my job. And I literally get up in the morning and can't wait to go to work. And this is where the Holy Spirit intended for me to be all along. There's no question.
That's wonderful. It's a great way to end this time with you. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right.